In this lecture, I'm going to be talking about another approach for name entity recognition. So I'll be focusing on this article in 2020, which is called Simple and Effective Few-Shot Name Entity Recognition with Structured Nearest Neighbor Learning. So they present a simple few-shot name entity recognition system based on nearest neighbor learning and structured inference. Their system uses a supervised NER module trained on the source domain as a feature extractor. Across several test domains, they show that the nearest neighbor classifier in this feature space is far more effective than the standard meta-learning approaches. They further propose a cheap but effective method to capture the label dependencies between entity tags without expensive conditional random field training. One of the primary challenges in adapting NER to new domains is the mismatch between the different domain-specific entity types. For example, only 2 out of 23 entity types annotated in I2B2 can be found in the onto nodes 5 annotations. So this is an example that we have support and the target. And for example, we have professions, president, minister, and dates. So these are part of other class, and nearest neighbor classifier is better at predicting the O class using an instance-based metric compared to methods using class-based metric. The direct adaptation of existing few-shot classification methods to few-shot NER is challenging for 2 reasons. First, NER is essentially a structured learning problem. It is crucial to model label dependencies as shown in this paper instead of directly classifying each token independently using the existing few-shot classification approaches. And then second, few-shot classification models typically learn to represent each semantic class by a prototype based on the label examples in its support set. However, for name entity recognition, unlike the entity classes, the outside class does not represent any unified semantic meaning because it's a quite big class and it could be anything inside it because it's others. And of course we have, for example, location and person and other things, but this area is quite big. So in fact, tokens labeled with O in a dataset actually correspond to different semantic spaces that should be separately represented in a metric-based learning framework. And for example, in this example, the semantic classes such as profession and dates may also belong to the O class for some NER datasets. Thus, previous approaches end up learning a noisy prototype for representing O class in the low resource setting. NER is a sequence labeling task where each token in a sentence is either labeled as part of an entity class or O class if it does not belong to an entity. In practice, tagging schemes such as BIO or IO are adopted to represent if a token is at the beginning or inside of entity X. Few-shot NER focuses on a specific NER setting where a system is trained on annotation of one or more source domains and then tested on one or more target domains by only providing few labeled examples per entity class. It's a challenging problem since a target tag set can be different from any source tag set. So few-shot NER systems need to learn to generalize to unseen entity classes using only a few labeled examples. For example, the task of K-SHOT-NER is defined as given an input sentence and K-SHOT support set of target set, we find the best tag sequence for X. And the K-SHOT support set contains K entity examples for each entity class. A standard evaluation set. Prior work on Few-Shot-NER followed Few-Shot classification literature and adopted the episode evaluation methodology. Specifically, an NER system is evaluated with respect to multiple evaluation episodes. An episode includes a sampled K-SHOT support set of labeled examples and a few sample K-SHOT test sets. In addition to these prior practices, we propose a more realistic evaluation setting by sampling only the support set and testing a model on the standard test sets from NER benchmarks. For support set construction, in order to test our models in Few-Shot setting, they sample support set from the standard development set of benchmark dataset. And we account for the variance of our model performance by sampling multiple support sets and reporting the average performance on the test set for these sampled support sets. And we plan to release the different support sets used for evaluation. Unlike classification tasks, a sentence in NER may contain multiple entity classes. Thus, simply sampling K sentence for each entity will result in many more entities of frequent classes than those of less frequent classes. As sampling entities of infrequent classes is more likely to also bring in entities of frequent classes than the other way around. Because of this, we utilize a greedy sampling strategy to build support set as shown in this algorithm. So we record some number of shots and label set with tag set, and then we sort classes based on their frequency. We initialize a support set. Then we initialize counts of entity classes in support. And then we have two nested loops that we sample and without replacement, and then we update our count. So we present our Few-Shot-NER based on structured nearest neighboring learning, and the method uses NER model trained in the source domain as a token embedder to generate contextual representation for all tokens. At inference, these static representations are simply used for nearest neighbor token classification. And they also use Viterbi decoder to capture label dependencies by leveraging tag transitions. That's why they're using, they call it struct shot, because it's a structured nearest neighbor learning. The backbone of this method is a simple token-based nearest neighbor classification. But at inference, given a test example and K-SHOT entity support set, this S support, comprising of n sentences and n shot, employs a token embedder to obtain contextual representation of all tokens in their sentences. So it computes a similarity score between the token X in the test sample and all tokens X prime in the support set. It assigns the token X a tag C corresponding to the most similar token in the support set. And they use the Euclidean distance for the distance. Most meta-learning approaches simulate the test time during. So in this paper, they instead use NER model trained on the source domain to learn token level representation that minimizes the supervised cross-entropy loss. And supervised NER models typically consist of token embedder followed by a linear classifier. So everything is standard until here. These models are also minimize the cross-entropy loss. And this is the target transition probabilities. Because the name of the title of this paper suggests it's a structured prediction, they are using these transition probabilities because they care about different structures, because if you just don't focus on them individually, but also how the transition also plays an important role. But the usual CRF is very complex, computationally expensive, but here they use a different idea. So the key idea is that it estimates the abstract transition probabilities by just counting the number of times a particular transition was observed. Because you can count these frequencies, number of times a transition from X to Y or anything to Y. But they can be drawn also from prior distribution because you know a given domain. For Viterbi, we obtained the emission probabilities. So this is transition probability, but this one is emission probability because you want to know the emission of some particular label given your sentence for each token in the test example. And given the abstract transition distribution and the emission distribution, they use Viterbi decoder to solve this structured inference problem. As the emission and transition probabilities are estimated independently, they introduce a temperature hyperparameter tau that renormalizes the transition probabilities to align the emission and transition score to a similar scale. So you see, this is also very important information that you care about these transition probabilities. The one-shot NER systems generally perform better on domain transfer than on tag set extension, while the 5-shot systems work better on the tag set extension task. On the domain transfer task, the source entity classes overlap with some entity classes in the target domain, which benefits NER systems built under the extremely low resource condition. However, in general, domain transfer is more challenging than tag set extension due to language variation across different domains. Not surprisingly, the 5-shot NER system are not only more accurate but also more robust than the 1-shot systems. The standard deviations reported with multiple 5-shot supported are much lower than those obtained in 1-shot. So you can compare domain transfer with tag set extension. These are the F1 score results of episode evaluation on 1-shot NER for both tag set extension and domain transfer with different tasks. And they report standard deviation from runs with 5 different support sets, sampled from validation sets, and these are the bold one are the best one. And for visualization, we always use TSNE algorithm. And you see the others, the blue one is a very big area. Always is a big area, so you cannot just put a single label, single class for them. we shouldn't ignore the semantic structure inside this big blue area.